Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I'm Poppet Guerra. How goes it?
And Poppet, this week we are going to review the new horror film that's due out in May on Shudder. Hello, Shudder.
Hi,
But
Shudder.
it's currently out in theaters, I should say. Stopmotion.
Yes, Damon. Stopmotion, of course, released in February of 2024, starring Aileen Franciosi as Ella Blake, Tony, what's his face? Tom York as Tom, Tony Nothing, and Robert Morgan's directing, and he writes with Robin King. Damon, yes, we are going to get to stop motion, but I want to get to something first, Damon. I want to get to the listener email. Now, last week on the show, we talked about Alien Resurrection, and we said, if you're out there and you know a steeper drop-off in a franchise than Alien Resurrection, write us and let us know, because we think this is falling straight off the cliff. This is probably the worst sequel from three great movies to a terrible movie. And Eric Schwartz wrote us and said, "Hello, guys. I enjoyed the new episode. The occasional trashing of something worth trashing in the context of a podcast that doesn't normally do such things can be really a lot of fun." And it was. And frankly, until listening, I had also genuinely forgotten that I'd seen Alien Resurrection. Actually, I'm now pretty certain I saw it in a theater and then just completely blocked out the experience, which you and I have the exact same sentiment of for, Damon. I was considering this idea of most precipitous drops in quality from one horror franchise installment to the next, and the first thing that popped into my head was Jaws to Jaws 2. Now, I must confess that I really don't remember Jaws 2 at all well, but it is certainly an instance of one of the greatest horror films of all time being closely followed by, at best, a completely forgettable, forgotten sequel. Or maybe it was amazing and I just need to watch it again as an adult. Anyhow, lovely work as always. My very best to you both, Eric Schwartz, aka Eric of the Heavy Metal 101 podcast, which sounds like a podcast you and I probably need to listen to, because I'm a Hesher for life. I know Damon loves metal too, so we'll be checking out the Heavy Metal 101 podcast. And Damon, I think Eric makes a great point that indeed Jaws is not just one of the best horror films of all time. It's easily and unarguably one of the greatest films of all time. And then its sequel is like, what? I don't even remember the plot of Jaws 2. Do you?
I do. So because we had this kind of little conversation about this over text when we saw the email, because we both responded in the email. So I put Jaws as like one of my top 5 films of all time. I don't categorize it in like horror versus whatever else. It's like one of my all-time 5 favorite films ever. Jaws 2, I would say, isn't as bad as Alien Resurrection, but when you consider it compared to Jaws, I kind of agree with Eric, where it's just a massive, massive drop-off from that. Because Alien 3, as I said, Alien 3 to me was good. It wasn't great. I didn't love it. I like it, but it doesn't hold up to Alien or Aliens. But that's still a pretty steep drop-off to a complete, utter piece of crap like Alien Resurrection. Jaws 2, the plot is it's the same as Jaws 1. Another shark comes to Amity, except Hooper's not around and Quint's dead, and now it's just Chief Brody. And once again, the mayor doesn't believe him, and nobody believes him, and he's basically on his own to stop another killer shark. It's literally rehashing the first movie with less interesting characters around. It's not good. It's not good at all, and there's a reason why no one really talks about that film, or probably any of the Jaws sequels. Even the 3D one, which I do remember seeing that as a kid in 3D, and I was so amazed by the 3D in that one. But yeah, and also Michael Caine was in a Jaws sequel, which of all people,
it's my favorite Jaws sequel. It's so bonkers stupid. It's the stupidest sequel I've ever seen.
But yeah, I think he makes a great point, because again, for me, Alien 3 is a good film. It's not a great film. Jaws is an all-time top 5 classic. And Jaws 2, while I don't think it's as bad as Alien Resurrection, it is exactly what he said, a completely forgettable film with literally the same plot, but just less good characters. Like they didn't bring back, I even like, obviously they killed off Quentin the first one, and at that point, sadly, we know the actor who played him died not long after the film was made. But then, why am I not? Richard Dreyfuss probably saw, yeah, I'm not. I want nothing to do with this, and moved on. So yeah, it's a bad movie. So he's got a really good point, because that is like an all-time great movie to just a completely utter forgettable sequel.
If you're talking about like the top 100 films of all time, like Jaws is probably in the top 10 of all time films, like of the best that have ever been made. Like really, like it's one of the most amazing movies ever made. And then the next film, it's like, I don't even remember what that was. Like that doesn't happen to any other movie in a franchise where you're just like, I don't even know what the next one is. So I think Eric had a great point that precipitous drop off is almost much more severe. It's like we had Alien, and then, or even just Alien and Aliens, and then the next movie was Alien Resurrection. You'd be like, whoa, you guys, what did you just do? You just went from Aliens to that? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Eric's got a great point, and I might have to give it to him on this one. I think he's beat us. This to me is a more precipitous drop off than even Alien Resurrection.
Yeah, the only other one I could think of after the podcast was over, and again, this is not a great film, but boy, talk about a drop off. I didn't hate Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. That wasn't a terrible movie. Our boy Ken Foray is in it. It's not the worst. It's not good, but it's not. But then, boy, is part 4 just. But again, that's not because again, part 3 is not great. So it's like, yeah, but it's kind of like what we talked about with Nightmare on Elm Street 5 going to Freddy's Dead. Like
they let us down easy.
Yeah, they're like, we're gonna let you down before we just completely cut before we completely cut you loose of the parachute and let you fall to the ground and die. So yeah, I think he's got a good point, because you're talking about Jaws is one of the greatest movies ever, and then Jaws 2 it's not good, and it's just, again, like, I've seen it, I just revealed the plot to you, and I don't remember anything else about the movie.
One day I guess we're gonna do the Jaws franchise at some point one day. I can't wait to get to Jaws: The Revenge. The Michael Caine one is an absolute shit show.
Is that the same one? I think is that the same one, or is it the
Mario Van Peebles is also in that one?
That's also okay. Mario Van Peebles. That's what I remember about him too. Yeah. So.
Oh my god, and I think Michael Caine did say, "Yeah, that movie's a pile of shit, but it bought me a house."
Yeah, I mean, good for him, dude. Like. Yeah.
That's the same argument Sigourney made for Alien Resurrection. Yes, I died in the other movie, but they backed up $11 million to my garage, and so I took that.
Do you know what I just saw? This is going way off the subject. You know what I just saw on cable like a month ago? And I meant to mention this on a podcast. Now, I'm sure this wasn't for a paycheck. This was very early in her career, but I remember seeing it late one night on Showtime. And I was like, what in the hell is this? Is one of the random Children of the Corn sequels? And I'm talking like Children of the Corn, like 6, like way after the first one. Mm-hmm. Naomi Watts is in a Children of the Corn movie from the early 90s. I was like, Naomi Watts is in a Children of the Corn movie? Like, how early in her career? Like, that was full on like Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey being in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4. I saw her and I was like, is that really Naomi Watts? And yes, she is in like Children of the Corn 4, like, Corn Again or whatever the hell it is. I don't know what it's
Corn called. Again. Bless Naomi Watts' heart and all of the top flight actors that got their start in horror. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, Damon. I absolutely love hearing this one or that one. Like I remember turning on the TV and it was one of the many Hellraiser sequels and it looked like absolute lunacy. I was like, oh my god, which one is this? And then I see Adam Scott, the great Adam Scott from Parks and Rec and from Severance and all that. I was like, what's Adam Scott doing in a Hellraiser movie?
Yeah, I mean, Paul Rudd got his start with Halloween 6, the really bad, the Curse of Michael Myers. He's in there, and don't forget, of course, what's the director's name who did the Black Phone? He directed Scott Derrickson. He directed one of the bad Hellraiser movies.
I think it was actually the one I was watching. If I'm not mistaken, Scott Derrickson directed the one with Adam Scott in it.
Yeah, he directed that. Funny. And then, I mean, don't forget, Steven Spielberg, or not Steven, I always said Steven Spielberg. James Cameron, before he directed Terminator, his first film was Piranha 2, The Spawn, or whatever it was called. So,
yeah,
you got to get your start somewhere.
You got to break in somehow, and a lot of people do it through horror. I love that.
Yeah. So let's get back on our topic at hand, which is stop motion. A new film just released, which, by the way, I'm not sitting here trying to be the grammar guy, because even though I'm the English literature guy, I want to get your pronunciation here, because I had to do some research on this, because our lead actress is from Ireland. My family is Irish. I have Irish heritage, so I like to see these names. When I saw her name, I knew we were going to get her name wrong, or at least I knew I was only going to get her first name right. Her name is spelled Aisling. It's actually pronounced Ashling, is how you pronounce that.
Ashling.
And her last name is Franchosi, is how you pronounce her last name. So it's Ashling Franchosi.
Ashling Franchosi. Okay. Well, the one C threw me off. It was two, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever.
Ashling
She knows how to
Franchosi.
pronounce her name.
Well, because I was also curious about the little girl in the movie, and I looked her up, and her name, which is spelled really out there, it's Caollin, whatever, and her name is Kaylin Springall. So just Kaylin.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There's some other name out there. I remember that. Like there was someone, it might have been a fighter or something. I was like, her name is so interestingly spelled. And it was like, you would never guess it.
That's how I learned how to say Ashling, because there used to be a fighter named Ashling Daly, and she had the exact same name. She was from Ireland, and that's how
I remember Ashling Daly. Yeah.
So
but I don't remember how to pronounce her name.
Yeah, so there you go. So Ashling Franchosi. I wrote it down phonetically just so I could make sure I got it correct on the show. So Ashling Franchosi is the star of Stop Motion, just so we get that name correct. I'm bad at I've learned, because I had a couple we've done intros for, and I know I got the name wrong. And I'm like, so now I go on YouTube and I look for interviews with people to see how they pronounce their names to make sure I'm getting it correctly, because there are some that I'm just like, I know I'm butchering your name right now.
If you're a listener that wants to dig in the crates of the old Rewind of the Living Dead episodes, go to the Satan Slave episode with all those Indonesian names and listen to me and Damon just take a weed whacker to these poor people's names. I mean, Jesus Christ, like we really butchered their names.
Yeah, so Ashling Franchosi, we're going to do an effort to get your name correct here, which she was in Game of Thrones. She played Lyanna Stark in Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
Until researching that tonight. So, so we were talking about stop motion. There's a lot of buzz about this film. That's why we're reviewing it. It's in theaters. It's coming out, as I mentioned, on Shudder in March, or May. I think May 31st, the very end of May is dropping on Shudder, but it's in theaters right now. And the reason we're reviewing this, not only because it's in theaters, because you and I both love the theater experience of horror movies, but there's a lot of buzz. I am on TikTok a lot. You can follow me at Damon of the Dead on TikTok, and a lot of the horror creators I follow over there were just like, stop motion, stop motion, stop motion. And so you mentioned it to me. You're like, hey, I'm going to see Stop Motion. I was like, it's funny you say that, because I've had a lot of people say it's great. I think we should go ahead and review this. So here we are reviewing Stop Motion. And I got to say, Patrick, I'm regretting this decision after seeing it. No, I don't go there.
Well, but you bring up a good point, because I think I decided to go see it because I also Patrick of the Living Dead on TikTok, by the way. I that's where I kind of mine what we're going to talk about, because you and I have the stupidest, busiest schedules I've ever seen. On your day off, you work at least 13 hours. On your day off, the one day off you get. I have kids. I actually travel for work. I'm rarely home. I just got off, like, I think a 13-day straight, like, working jog. Like, we work a lot. And so I can't sit and do a bunch of research about what to watch. And I go on TikTok, and sure enough, the horror creators that are on there were buzzing about Stop Motion. And I said, well, it's time to go check it out. And indeed, we went to go check it out, Damon. But I do know what you mean. Like, I don't regret seeing this movie at all, by the way. And spoiler alert, like, I actually kind of liked it. But the hyperbolic nature with which TikTok creators talk about movies is maddening. I don't know what that is. And truth be told, I don't think I'll ever be a great social media influencer, because I can't exaggerate how I feel about stuff. And I'm too way into, like, movies that I'll never be, like, super ice cold about something or super hot about something unless I truly love it, like Alien or Aliens or Texas Chainsaw, when it's just stuff that I absolutely adore, all-time classics. I'm going to be more nuanced about stuff. So when I see people go, this is the scariest movie I've seen in maybe 10 years. I had to look away at many moments, and I was like, oh, that sounds crazy. And I was, like, hearing it by, like, a few people. They were like, this is a super, super disturbing movie. And it's not that disturbing, Damon. I mean, look, you and I are very desensitized. We say it all the time, but I'm following these horror creators on TikTok who apparently spend at least a few days out of their week watching horror movies, like multiple horror movies in a week. I see most of them tend to average like 5, 6 viewings a week, which I'm jealous of. I am lucky if I get one movie in a week. And yeah, it wasn't like the scariest movie I've ever seen or anything like that. As you mentioned, the plot is this young woman, Ella, and her mother are stop motion artists. Her mom is like a famous stop motion artist, and her mom has lost the use of her hands because of I think arthritis, and so she is her mother's hands, and her mother is this master of stop motion, and really like a Phil Tippett type person who's like people just adore, and she lives in the shadow of her mom, and she has to like make her mom's final movie for her. Her mom is definitely on the way out, but she has this one final movie in her, and she is her hands. And it's it's an artsy fartsy movie, Damon. I'm going to say it right here, right now. It's about kind of the weight of creativity and the pressure of working amongst geniuses. I thought that theme in the movie was rather apropos for guys like you and me. You're a writer by trade. I'm a director. I'm a creator. I write. It's tough when you're working alongside really high talented established people and you're trying to find your own voice. And I think thematically, that's what Ella's going through in this movie. She's like, damn, I'm living in the shadow of my mom, who is like the best stop motion director of all time, apparently. And like, I don't even have good ideas. I've been there. I've been down that road. And that really resonated with me because I'm just like, damn, I'm working alongside this guy or that one, or I go to see a movie by like, Greta Gerwig, and I'm like, man, I wish I could like think like that. How come I can't think like that? That's what Ella's kind of going through. And of course, it's a horror movie, Damon, so we start to slip into madness. I'm okay with that. Let's slip into madness, make it make sense, scare the shit out of me or creep me out or unsettle me or do something like that. Stop motion, it does some of those things.
So I agree with the premise of what you're talking about, just to get to the plot of it. I agree with that part of it because I think we've all been there. And part of the struggle that Ella faces in the early part of this movie, which was, to be honest, my favorite part of the movie, where the opening probably 20 minutes of this movie was just the struggle of her living in the shadow of her mother. And there's a moment where almost like offensively she tells her mother like, hey, I have an idea, and her mother just like looks at her like, you just kicked my dog. Like, what? You have an idea for my movie? And then the next day her mother, kind of almost like talking down to her, says, well, what's your idea? And Ella just freezes because she doesn't really she knows she's trying to live up to her mother's her mother's accomplishments, and she can't do that. And so she just freezes and just shuts up and doesn't say a word. And her mother almost like revels in that because she's like, see, I told you, like, listen to me. I'm the master of craft. I'm the artist. I'm the genius. You're just my daughter. And so that aspect of the film spoke to me. I understood that because whether we're talking about fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, brothers, sisters, friends, we all have that person. In my craft as a mixed martial arts journalist in my day job, just to kind of give a little inside baseball talk here, what I actually do in my day job, there's a guy that typically writes in mixed martial arts journalism. His name is Chuck Mindenhall. He writes for The Ringer now. Good friend of mine, by the way. I'm not saying like I'm jealous of him, but like I read his stuff and I'm just like, God, can I put two words together in a sentence? Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, do I know how to write? Like, do I know the English language? Because this guy is a freaking genius. And then over time, I look at that and I read his stuff and I say, well, I need to make my stuff better. So I challenge myself to live up to the standard of a guy that I admire so much. So I think that's kind of like we're all guilty of that in some regard. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think the key here, not to get like philosophical or anything, but the key is how you take it and how you move on from that. For me, at the beginning, I was really intimidated, saying, my God, this guy's so good, I could never be him. But instead of trying to be him, I just tried to be better. So I could say, okay, I'm not going to be him, not going to try to be him, but I'm going to I'm allowing him to set a higher standard for me. You know, that the easiest way I can compare it is like if you're running a race. Okay, I may not beat this guy. I may not come in first place. Maybe I can come in second. You know what I mean? I'm okay with being second place because you know what? Second place is still pretty good. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's not a bad place to be. So it all depends on how you take it. Some people though take it to a much bigger, dangerous level, and that's kind of what we get into here with this movie, which is Ella really starts descending into madness. Now, we're not getting into spoilers quite yet, but you kind of see where we're going here. Like we see, like that's the plot of the movie. We're not ruining anything by telling because that's literally you can look it up, and that's. I mean, I read it in the intro. Like that's the intro. That's the movie. Like she's dealing with this, like just like living in the shadow of her mother, trying to find her own way in the world, and then descending into madness as she tries to find her own way in the world, following her mother falls ill and falls and passes away. As soon as that started to happen in this film, I was like, I know what's going on. I see what's coming. This got very predictable for me, and nothing surprised me. Now, I've said many times in this podcast, Patrick, we talk about best scare, and I say some of my favorite scares are the ones you see coming that still get me. I love those. But when a plot becomes so predictable and it's already kind of something I feel like I've seen before and I've seen it done better, a great example of that is a film we reviewed a couple of years ago that I didn't love. You loved. I didn't love. I liked it. I thought it was good enough. Was Saint Maud. That was a movie that 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it came out, 2021, whatever year it came out, that was the year everyone's like, oh my God, Saint Maud is the greatest achievement in filmmaking and horror filmmaking ever. I watched it. I was like, it's pretty good. Now, you loved it. I thought it was pretty good. I was kind of on like your side where I was kind of like lukewarm to it. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. I didn't think it was like this, the greatest thing I've ever seen in filmmaking, but we're all guilty of getting set up for failure when that happens. Like when somebody tells you like, oh my God, this is the best movie you've ever seen. It's never going to live up to those expectations. Saint Maud, even though it wasn't my favorite film, it did keep me on the edge of my seat, did keep me guessing with where it was going here and there and where it ended up. We all kind of had a general idea what it was. The problem with stop motion I had was I feel like I saw everything coming. There were no surprises. I saw every twist and turn before it happened. I'm not saying you can't enjoy a film like that, because you can, but occasionally I want to find out who Kaiser Soze is. I want to not know who Kaiser Soze is. I want to know, I don't want to know the heads in the box at the end of 7. Like sometimes I like the surprise. And so this film, my biggest problem, and we'll get into my other issues with this film, my biggest problem was I saw everything coming.
And I don't disagree with that. Like I found it to be a kind of a predictable plot. Like once there's certain elements that once they get introduced, you go, okay, I know where that's going. That's pretty obvious. But what I appreciated this time, it was very different for me. And honestly, the appeal for me when I saw the trailer for it, I don't know how many months ago, is that it's told through this like different template of stop motion. And like the tease in the trailer of the idea that I was going to get to see these disturbing scenes from of stop motion animation, which can be disturbing in its own right. It has a weird uncanny valley quality to it. I was like, well, okay, we're actually telling this very familiar story that I know through the lens of stop motion animation, because that's the director, his name, Robert Morgan's kind of claim to fame. I have seen The Cat with Human Hands. I've seen that before. Very talented stop motion animator. And so he was telling the story through that world. And so even though I knew where things were going, I was getting them from a different angle, and I could appreciate that. That was what I was appreciating about it. Things were predictable. Some things are confusing. And then I had a chance to read some interviews with him, and some of the interviewers were asking him certain things like, hey, why does that happen? And he'd be like, oh, I don't know. And like, you could tell his answer was sort of like, I did the best I could. Okay. Like, what do you want from me? And it is his first feature film. So, kudos to him. He made a great first feature film, but I did like, I guess, the package that it came in, even though I agree it was predictable. And there was things where I was like, well, I know where that's going. Like, you're not surprising me. And does that diffuse some of the dread a little bit? But then I was sort of like, well, okay, there's no dread, or there's no fear of the unknown because I know where this is going. But there is like all this different new eye candy and this little fable that they're telling and all that stuff. We'll get into most of it in spoilers. But yeah, I think that's why I think I could give this movie a little more slack than I normally would, because it was definitely something I hadn't seen before in that respect.
So when I first left the theater and I texted you about this, I was in a pretty dour mood because not I mean, listen, I mean, again, spoiler, I didn't love this movie. I'm just being honest, I didn't. But we've kind of joked on this podcast since we started that, like, you know, you, Patrick, are kind of like the art house guy, and I'm kind of more the mainstream. Not I would say mainstream, but just more straightforward horror guy in that regard. Now, we both like a lot of the same films. I would say, by and large, of the 180 whatever episodes we've done, I would still say at least 2/3 of the films we've generally agreed upon. And that's a lot of different movies and a lot of different genres. You know what I mean? That's not just, you know, they're not all Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street reviews. We do review a lot of horror films on here. But I was getting a little discouraged today because, like, I heard all these people, and again, I understand, like, the TikTok thing where you have to be over animated and, you know, overextend, but that happened last year with a lot of people talking about Talk to Me, and they said, oh my God, this movie's amazing, it's incredible, and it kind of set me up for failure a little bit because I'm like, uh-oh, what if I go see this now? Talk to Me ended up being my favorite horror film of last year, so that worked out for me. And that film was, you know, it was creative, it was new, it was different, it was really, really fun, and something I'd never really experienced in that kind of a film before. But it was still pretty straightforward, right? Like, it wasn't what I call an art house movie where you're like, at the end of it, you're just kind of like when we talk, go back and listen to our episode about Men, the movie Men, the A24 movie Men. And to this day, the ending of that movie not only pisses me off, but I'm just like, what in the bloody hell did I just watch? I don't like walking out of it. I understand, like, symbolism. I took philosophy in college. I understand, like, well, this is what they were going for. Like, you're supposed to understand, like, this is the relationship she had with her mother, and this is like, I understand all that. I'm smart enough to get that. But some of these art house movies, when I walk out, I'm just like, you made it visually stunning to try to just kind of like, almost like throw me off guard, or I don't even really know what you're going for. And a lot of it feels like you're just trying to make really cool images and not necessarily tell me a good story, or really cool images and you're not actually doing anything with it. And so I left the movie today and I'm just like, man, I'm starting to wonder, like, am I not smart enough, or am I just not, like, brainy enough to enjoy these art house horror films? Because so many of these films end up on, like, these best of lists at the end of the year. And it's almost like the party I didn't get invited to, because I'm like, yeah, my favorite film of last year was Talk to Me, and I think number 2 was Scream 6. Like, Scream 6 doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's a slasher film, and I've been very honest, slasher films are my favorite genre of horror film. I don't pick obscure movies just for the sake of picking. I've had this argument for years with the Oscars that, like, I feel like they go out of their way sometimes to pick obscure movies just because they're obscure movies. But, like, I genuinely left the theater today kind of bummed because I'm like, what? Like, I don't feel like I'm being invited to the party because I don't get the appeal of some of these art house movies. And it reminded me, one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Seinfeld. There's a great episode where they go to the video store, which we all miss the video store. I think we all do at this
desperately.
point. And there's an episode where Elaine has started renting videos recommended by this one guy in the store, and he's just like, he picks out the biggest arty, you know, Oscar bait movies, and Kramer is there in the store. And it reminded me of this quote when I saw this movie.
This Vincent guy, he is the best. He and I have the exact same taste in movies.
Oh, Vincent is an art house goon. I stick to the Gene rack.
Gene? Oh, he's so stupid and mainstream.
It just reminded me, that's me. I walked out of this movie like, oh, this was an art house goon movie. Give me Nightmare on Elm Street 4 again. Like, I just, like, and I'm not patting myself. Like, I know I'm an intelligent person. Like, I know I'm not a dumbass. I'm not trying to say that. Like, I understand it. But I walked out of this movie today and I'm just like, what am I not seeing? Because, like, I I didn't hate it to the point of like like when I watched The Outwaters, I got angry that I sat through that movie. Like I sat through that movie at the end of it. I'm like, what did I just like? I'll never get that hour and a half of my life back.
And Damon, people are still singing its praises to this day. It's getting a re-release at I think like one of the horror fests. Like people still talk about that movie with tons of praise.
Did you see? This is getting off subject, but like because we've had this conversation about A24, and I've come around. I've become an A24 fan. I really have. Did you see the trailer for the new film that's coming out? I saw the TV Glow or whatever it's called, the new one.
Yes.
So I saw the trailer for that, and I don't know what the hell that movie's about. Like,
yeah,
I have no idea. Now, I'm sure there's part of the reason they did that is because they don't want you to know what the movie's about, which to a point, we talked about trailers. They give away. We
appreciate that.
But it scares me. And like when I walked out of this movie today, I'm just like, what am I missing? Like, what am I not like? I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but I mean it. Like, I feel like I'm not being invited to the party where everyone else gets it. Like everyone's sitting around the table talking and having these intelligent conversations. And I'm Joey from Friends that has to look at only the V volume of the encyclopedia because I can't understand what everyone else is talking about.
But see, I think there's a phenomenon going on here. And truth is, you were invited to the party, Damon, which is there are the Damonites. There are the people who are like, Damon's right. Art house shit sucks, or it's too fucking heady, or why don't they just fucking tell us what they want? Why do they got to hide it around like flowy imagery? My wife hates slow motion in movies. She's like, why is this in slow motion? Like, can't it just be regular motion? You know, like everybody, that the thing about the internet is actually everybody has a group. I'm an art house goon. We've already established this. I'm right there with Vincent and Elaine. And I always told myself if I was going to hang out with anybody on Seinfeld, it was going to be Elaine. Like I knew I'd get along with Elaine, but I digress. The internet makes us believe that there's only one way, and there's really not. There's really just all the ways. But, you know, we end up in our algorithms and all of a sudden you and I are on TikTok and we're seeing the same people. You don't tell me who to follow. I follow who I follow. You follow who you follow. And before you know it, we're talking about the same people because the algorithm's pushing us to the same people. And all of a sudden we're hearing the same idea coming out of 20 different people. It just, this is, you know, the algorithm goes, Damon and Patrick are friends. They will like these people. Patrick looked at this one. Damon looked at that one. Let's push them together. And like, that's all that's happening. And it gives us this sense that like, there's an overwhelming love for these movies. By the way, speaking of the Outwaters, a certain podcaster I know that I will not out finally sat down to watch the Outwaters. And I messaged them on Twitter and I go, just DM me your honest feelings about the Outwaters. I want to know. And they were getting back to me going, I cannot believe people praise this movie. We're not alone. And that person's on a much more visible podcast and a visible platform than we are. We're not alone. We feel like we're alone, but we're not. It's just, you know, like the algorithm pushes us the most popular people because it's trying to sell ads. And so before you know it, all the people who love Outwaters, or all the people who love Barbarian, or all the people who love this one or that one, or all the people who love Halloween Ends. I saw those people the other day arguing in John Carpenter's mentions on Instagram. They're like, all these people are out there. The truth is, taste is just as diverse as it ever was. We're just being pushed like amplified things. So it gives us what I would say, an artificial sense that everybody's into this thing. It's not. It's probably 10 people that we're actually looking at, if we really think about it.
Yeah, there were two. I want to read this because I want to give credit where credit's due. And this made me feel a little bit better about me feeling like a jackass and not knowing why I didn't enjoy this movie. On the Stopmotion Wikipedia page, there are two reviews that they list on there. One is from Megan Navarro, Bloody Disgusting, which Bloody Disgusting is an incredible horror website. Read them all the time. I like that website very much. Hers is a very positive review, and I want to read a segment of this. And she wrote, when so many filmmakers opt for style over substance, the style is substance here. Morgan surprises with an immersive sensory assault. Art and storytelling collide in breathtaking yet revolting fashion. Morgan's knockout debut opens up the veins of a turbulent artist, delivering one creepy melding of mediums to an unsettling, powerful degree. Now, the second reviewer is Peter Sabinski from RogerEbert.com, the great Roger Ebert, of course. And he wrote, and his was on kind of like my feeling of this movie, which is, although it clearly wants to be seen as some kind of wild hallucinatory exploration into the heart of madness, stop motion eventually reveals itself to be little more than a collection of barf bag visuals and tired conventions that are occasionally enlivened by some nifty animation and the strong performance from Franchosi. When I read that review, I was like, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, there's a lot of fancy moving parts and flashing imagery, and we're on a hallucinatory drug trip almost, and descent into madness, and we're going to see what it's like to go into madness. And I just didn't get it. Like, I left the theater, it's like I saw everything coming. It was all predictable to me. Every twist and turn, again, we'll get into spoilers here in a second. The biggest one, which I can't mention on the show, which we'll get into in spoilers, I was like, as soon as it happened, I was like, I know exactly what's going on here. And I was right. And so you're probably right. Like, we're all getting pushed in the algorithm, and I'm seeing the 10, 20 people who love stop motion. I walked out of the theater and I just legitimately felt like I was stupid. I was like, why am I not getting this? Why is everyone else thinking this is just like this amazing exploration of art that I've never understood before in horror? And then I'm leaving the theater being like, can I see Art the Clown? Like, is he coming back anytime soon? Like, we just see him slicing people up.
And you know what? Both of those excerpts from both of those reviews, and both of those reviews are polar opposites. They're both well written. They both make a solid argument. Like, both of them do. That's the thing. That's my point. It's like, don't worry about it. At the end of the day, it's just like, and believe me, boy, I feel like this year we've been slightly cursed. Like, the beginning of the year has not been strong, at least in yours and mine opinion. And so the people that we end up getting pushed to in the algorithm, they might be on the Rewind of the Living Dead tip, and they'll be like, yeah, we think the first part of the year sucks. We had one fan who was like, why are you guys shitting on the movies I like? And we're like, well, we're not fully shitting. We're sharding a little bit. That's all. We have an opinion. I believe we're more nuanced than most shows. I believe most shows have a very, they have a slant on purpose, because it does attract a bunch of people to just be like way into something and way not into something. And it's like, we sort of try to figure out why. And I think the why at the end of the day, Damon, is you're not alone. There's plenty. You can go to the movies with all the Damonites, and you guys will all sit there and watch the double feature of Men and stop motion, and then murder 20 people on the way out because you're so pissed off. It's fine. Like, it's not fine to murder people. It's just fine that you get mad about something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay. You don't have to love it or get it. Sometimes it's just the day you watch it. I've had that happen with movies where I just go, I hated that movie. I fucking hated that movie. We did this last year, right? What movie was that? You hated a movie. And you're like,
Midsommar. That's the one.
Midsommar. Yeah. Oh, there it was. An art house movie. I argue that I believe Midsommar is an art house movie. You, for the entire time we have done that podcast, have been like, fuck Midsommar. Fucking hate that shit. Fucking hate that art house bullshit. Then we sat down and watched it again, and cooler heads prevailed. And you went, you know what? It's not bad. Truth be told, it's not that bad. Like, that's kind of reality. That's kind of the reality check, is check something out. If you don't like it, cool. You certainly don't need to rewatch it. But one day, rewatch it when you're in a different mood, and you might see it differently.
Yeah, again, stop motion, I understand. I think here's the thing that differentiates my feelings towards this movie than even a movie like Men, which that movie got bizarre at the end of that movie for the sake. I still to this day believe they went way out on a limb and went bizarre for the sake of being bizarre. I don't think they really.
Even I didn't like the ending, and I love the rest of the movie.
Yeah, but and that was a film just steeped in symbolism. That entire film was symbolism.
Yeah.
This one's not. This one is definitely more forward going. This one is not jutting off into different places trying to guess, trying to make you understand what they're going for. At the end of it, there's no test at the end of this movie where they're like, here's the quiz. Did you understand what we were trying to do in this movie? Those are the movies that piss me off the most. Like, I want to go to a movie for like a bit of escapism. I want to enjoy myself. Now, I don't mind thinking to watch a movie, but I don't want to get done to the movie and be like, what in the fuck did I just watch? And sometimes I feel like there are some like art house horror films where like that's the purpose. They want to confuse you to the point where you leave the theater and they gotta hand you a quiz to where you can understand what you just watched. You're like, no, that's not what we were going for. We were going for this. You're like, oh, I totally didn't get that. Stop motion is more straightforward than that. I will say that. Like, I understood what was happening in stop motion. I understood where they were going in stop motion. I understood the plot. I understood the characters. I just feel like I've been here before, and I've seen better versions of this film. Saint Maud, not to keep repeating myself, but Saint Maud was a film that, again, I didn't love. I enjoyed it. But when that was over, I was like, I see the appeal of Saint Maud. Stop motion, to me, this is my opinion, certainly not your opinion, my opinion, is a lesser, less creative version of that. Because they're similar in the tone of woman slipping into madness. Now, the reason they're slipping into madness, totally different, but slipping into madness is a common theme, right? Like, that's not a uncommon theme in filmmaking. I saw it coming, and I just saw everything coming, and everything kind of became predictable. And by the end of the movie, I was like, nothing surprised me. And to me, when you're making these kind of movies, what I call the art house movies, I feel like originality is a big part of it, right? Like, when I watched The Witch, which there's a lot of people who love The Witch, the Robert Eggers film, who love The Witch, and I know a lot of people who hate that movie. It's slow, it's boring, nothing happens.
Right, nothing's happening, yeah.
I love The Witch. I love Robert Eggers. Give me that guy. Like, when Nosferatu comes out later this year, I will be the first guy in line at the theater to see that movie. But I understand, kind of like what you're talking about. I understand it is slow. It is, it is a slow burn movie. And a lot of people hate slow burn movies. I get it. But with these art house movies, what I really strive for, what I really like to see in these kind of movies, for me, and this is my opinion, is originality. Again, I know I wouldn't say Talk to Me is an art house movie by any stretch of it. It's an independent movie, but it's not an art house movie. It's an A24 movie because they bought it. But what I loved about Talk to Me was the originality of it. What I appreciate about Saint Maud, even though I didn't love the movie, was I appreciate the originality of it. The Witch, I appreciate the originality of it. And it took me a second viewing and letting go of my bitter feelings to watch Midsommar again and say, you know what? That is it is folk horror, but it is original. There are some original ideas in Midsommar, which made me enjoy it more the second time around. That's what I think lost me in stop motion. It was predictable, and I didn't feel like I was seeing anything totally original. Outside of, yes, the stop motion animation in there, but the stop motion community is going to come from my throat here, but I'm not like a stop motion. Like, I understand Phil Tippett is a genius. I get it, but I'm not like a stop motion animation guy. Like, I've never really totally been into, like, I like animated films, but I'm not really into stop motion animation. I appreciate what it is, but it just doesn't really do a lot for me. So while that isn't unique and original in this movie, and I know everyone's going to say, oh, what are you talking about? The stop motion animation, like the interlacing of the story and the characters with the stuff. I understand. I can appreciate the artistry in that. But at the end of the day, the story, the actual, what I'm seeing unfold is the same thing I've seen done better in other movies.
Damon, we might as well get into spoilers and start talking about it. Don't you agree?
I agree. So stop motion is in theaters now. I believe it's a limited run. So if you haven't seen it yet, go out and see it. We're going to drop this episode on Tuesday. Go see it right away. If you haven't seen it, it will drop on Shudder in May. I believe it's May 31st, right at the end of May. It drops on Shudder.
Somewhere around there.
So again, if you can see it in theaters, and again, I always say this, I don't care if I hate a movie. I'm not going to tell you to run out and see Halloween Ends. I certainly would never tell you to do that, but maybe you will love it. So go see it for yourself is all I'm saying. Like, just because I don't like something or Patrick doesn't like something, go see it for yourself. And especially in this day and age, support theaters, because I love the theater experience. So go see it in theaters. So with that being said, let's get into spoilers for stop motion. And I'll let you go first, Patrick, in terms of what was what you loved about it. Because I know, when I say love, you liked this movie. You didn't love it.
This movie.
You liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, I give this I said it was good, not great, and I stand by that. I think it was a good movie, not a great movie. You know what? The catalyst for this movie, it's right there in the log line. The mom dies. That's the catalyst. The mom has this. They're in the middle of doing their work. Mom has a severe stroke, and they manage to do some scary stuff in that moment. And then you realize, oh, mom is actually sick. And then it becomes kind of this weird disjointedness. Like right after mom goes into the hospital and is in the coma, from that point on, I was like, is there a piece of the reel missing? Like something like all of a sudden, like time jumped in a really weird way. And I was slightly disoriented. And then I realized what was going on, which was this sort of like this major catalyst in Ella's life that caused her to completely snap. She was already so insecure about her mom being this great director, that the potential death of her mom, and now that her mom's comatose and that it's up to her to finish her mom's story, broke her. Because she was already, and I thought they did a good job. You said you liked the first 20 minutes. They did a really good job of showing, without saying much, just showing in a very, I think, obvious way, not even in an art house way, that her and her mom's relationship was terribly toxic. And that her mom called her Poppet. And sometimes it sounded like puppet. And that is exactly what Ella was to her. She was just something that her mom was there to manipulate. It was very loveless. Her mom was not loving to her. Her mom was, this vicious genius, and she was being crushed under the weight of her mother's presence. And when she was finally released from it, it was like, well, hey, here's the first thing you got to do, Ella. Finish your mom's movie. You know what it is, so go finish it. But she's not the genius. Her mom is. How do I finish my mom's movie? And the pressure of that crushes her even more and snaps her. And then, Damon, we meet what I called in my notes the little brat. And in the actual film, she's just called the little girl. This little girl that's in this apartment building that is bugging the shit out of her while she's trying to finish her mom's movie is like, hey, and you hear it in the trailer, she goes, that's boring. And the girl's like, what do you know, kid? Like, I'm doing this, like, my mom is a genius stop motion person. I'm trying to finish your film. But yet this young girl's like, I got a better story. I got a story about this guy who shows up and who's chasing this girl through the woods. And, he'll visit her on 3 nights, and he's the man that no one wants to touch. Well, that sounds kind of interesting. And that interested me. I love the idea of the man who no one wants to touch. I was like, that's cool. And Ella was like, yeah, that is kind of cool. And then so she has another break. Like all of a sudden, like time jumps again. And before you know it, her mom's stuff is ruined. And now she's starting on the story that the girl told her. But that, Damon, continues to break her. Because truth be told, that wasn't even her idea. Or so we think. Dun, 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 right? Like she's wrestling with the idea that she can't come up with anything. Which, again, I said earlier, I can very much relate to. When I'm trying to come up with stories and one of my buddies is like, hey, check out this, they'll like pitch me an idea and I'll be like, fuck, I wish I would have thought of something that clever. That's exactly what Ella's going through, except she's in an absolutely manic state. And now she's like kind of negotiating with this little girl to get more of the story from this girl. And the girl comes to her and goes, make the stop motion with like a meat puppet, or make the stop motion with this dead fox, like shit, like this little sadistic girl. And she doesn't want to be pressured by this little girl, but at the same time, she's like, well, fuck, I don't have ideas. I'll let the little girl tell me the ideas, and then that's how this will get going. And of course, Damon, I don't need to belabor the story any longer. We know that just spirals into an absolute tornado of madness for her that ends in absolute lunacy. Truth be told, like way, like more on the order of a Men ending than on the order of even a Saint Maud ending. I think Saint Maud ending is up for interpretation, but it's pretty straightforward. It's one or the other thing, and it's pretty obvious it's the other thing. This is just sort of like a spiral down into madness, and then just completely lost in it at the end. But listen, some people, my co-host here, Damon, wasn't quite satisfied with that. Damon, tell us why.
So first off, again, as soon as I saw the really fractured relationship and the domineering relationship that Ella had with her mother, I could already see that she had been kind of browbeaten into submissiveness. And like when her mother got sick, she was both alone because her mother had domineered and ruled over her life for so long. She really didn't know how to like go, where to go, what to do, because she'd lived under her mother's thumb for so long. Like, she has a boyfriend, she goes out and drinks with him, has sex with him, but then has to get home before her mother wakes up, because that's how controlling her mother is she has to be there before her mom wakes up. And she's a 30-year-old woman. Like, this isn't like she's a teenager. So when her mother gets sick and then eventually dies, like she's already like free falling, because her mother basically told her like, you can go to the bathroom. Like, that's how domineering her mother was. And once her mother's gone, she doesn't know which way to turn. And so when she moves into this apartment building that her boyfriend sets her up in to get her out of the house, which was a weird, I guess I get it, because it was the house she shared with her mother, and there was like a lot of bad memories there, and she's just like, let's move you into this apartment. It was just a weird, like, okay, I guess we're going to move into this apartment, whatever. Anyways, as soon as she moves in, she right away runs into this little girl, this annoying little girl who's like, oh, your stop motion movie's boring and blah, blah, blah. And she just like invites her in, and the girl's like, I don't know, 10, 11, 10 years old, 9, 10 years old. First off, you don't invite children into your home unless you want the police battering your door down, because someone's going to come looking. But as soon as the girl showed up, I said, this is a figment of her imagination. The girl is not there. And as things got weirder and weirder, and she's like, here, use this steak and cut it up and use the meat and put it underneath the mortician's wax to use to make the faces, make that part of it. And then she says, here, use this dead fox, cut it up and use the bones. And when she says, I won't do that, she's like, well, I'm not telling you the next part of the story. I knew her from her first appearance. She wasn't really there, but it just got really, more and more obvious throughout the movie that she wasn't there, and that she was just kind of like,
and at one point they're not trying to hide it anyway.
Yeah, they do stop at one point, but I guess that's kind of gets back to my predictability of it all, because again, I know I'm going back to Saint Maud again. When Saint Maud had her visions in that movie, we knew they were visions. We knew she was like, suffering from like this intense guilt of her religion and things like that, morality, what she was struggling with in that movie. But this movie was like, at least at the beginning, they're trying to fool you. Like, this little girl's in this build, they're trying to be, now, again, as it gets further and further in the film, you realize that, like, she's clearly not there. But I knew the minute she showed up. Now, when that's your device, because again, in Saint Maud, I knew she was hallucinating. Like, we all knew. You know what I mean? This movie, they try to fool you. At least in the beginning, they're trying to fool you, right? Like the little girls in the hallway.
For a little while, yeah.
And so, again, right away, I'm like, yeah, I know what you're doing. And then I just knew it's going to spiral. And when she said, I got a story for you, immediately I was like, this is in her own head. She can't come up with her own story. So this is her fragmented reality of, I can't come up with my own stories. And she's lived under her mother's thumb for so long, with her mother telling you have no good ideas. Stop even pretending you can do what I do. This was her fractured psyche saying, okay, here's how we create a story. We create a whole nother person to tell you the story. Mm-hmm. And so then she becomes desperate to get more of this story from the little girl so she can finish her movie. And it just gets more and more unhinged as time passes. We also learn throughout the movie that Ella's not sleeping, so she's going into full-on like hallucinations, because if you don't sleep for several days in a row, you will go full-on freaking mad. Like, you will literally lose your mind. It just, everything that happened I saw coming, and nothing really struck me as original. And there's even a part when they did this is the moment where I never walk out of a movie. I've come close a couple of times. I didn't actually think about getting up and leaving, but I was just like, when this happened, I was just like, good Lord, man, just beat me over the baseball bat with what you're going with here. There's a moment where she has an interaction with her boyfriend's sister, and her boyfriend's sister works at an animation studio doing advertising. And You can tell that Ella thinks she's above that because she's a filmmaker. She's not going to work in animation for an advertising studio. That's lowly. You can't do that. But at one point, her boyfriend's sister says that, oh, I get my best ideas when I'm tripping balls. And so she goes to this party and she gets acid from the sister and she's like, I need some good ideas. Can I trip balls? And so she hands her acid. And then for the next 10 minutes, we go into the typical fever dream acid trip. And as somebody who's done acid and has done stuff in my life, every time I see those, I'm just like, I wonder if these people have actually done acid or not. Because, you've ever done acid? I'm not saying you should, by the way. Let me just be clear about that. But everyone's acid trip is so incredibly individual, and I've rarely seen it depicted. Probably, actually, you know what the best depiction of acid trip is Big Lebowski. That to me is the best definition of just full on you're in a weird fantasy world. It's not
Fear and Loathing was good too.
But yeah, so as soon as she did that, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna trip balls." I'm like, come on now. Is the next scene gonna be they're coming in with the white coats to take her off to the asylum? Everything felt like I'd seen it before, and I'd seen it done better in other films. And I think that's what irritated me the most about this film. And then when it got to the ending, which is her just full on descent into madness, where she's literally cutting her own leg open to get the meat, so to speak, for her character, to build her characters, and she ends up killing her boyfriend, she kills the sister, she's using them as props. The last 20, it's the polar opposite. The first 20 minutes I enjoyed. I kind of saw what they were going for. I saw the setup. I saw the relationship between the daughter and the mother. I was like, okay, I see what this is. The last 20 minutes was so utterly predictable. I was just waiting for the credits to roll.
You know what I think it is, Damon? Because again, I did say that this movie's okay and not the best movie. Is that in that fractured reality, some of the story just kind of falls away is actually the problem. It was intriguing, the relationship between her and her mom, and they kind of try to revisit it. At one point, she tries to go back to the hospital and visit her while she's still in a ventilator. And, again, her mind is just so twisted at this point that she can't really hold on to reality very well. So the fracturedness of it sort of creates it makes the story inert. All of a sudden the story kind of doesn't matter because she is just going crazy. It would have been very interesting to keep the mom in the story somehow. I'm not trying to really rewrite the movie, but I think, you know what I was waiting for? I was waiting for the boyfriend and the sister to walk in and her to turn around and go, look how great this movie is. And then you see the mom in an armature, and she's manipulating the mom. I was like, let's bring it all the way home. Her mom had her in her hands like a little marionette. Can we turn that around by the end? I was waiting for her to use the mom in the end, and that never happened. Not that that's what it had to be, but it seemed like the story of her and her mom got lost in all the psychosis.
Yeah, not to interrupt you, just to rewrite, as you say that, if they would have used the mom, she was going to the hospital and her mom was like, here's an idea, here's what you should do. And instead of the little girl, but we find out the mother was never, she was comatose and dead, and she was having conversations with her mother who was never there. That would have made more sense to me because her mother had this real sick, kind of twisted hold over her. If they would have gone that route, I would have kind of understood a little bit more. She's so domineering that even in her deathbed, she still has to have her mom, why don't you do this? Why don't you try this? And then at the end, if we find out that her mother was never there, she died, when she had the stroke, we'd be like, oh man, this girl is full. That would have made a little bit more protecting this little girl who just randomly shows up, and it's so obvious she's not there. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted
But I think you're making the same point I'm making, which was I think the mom story was what hooked me, and then they jettison it for psychosis, totally. When there was just so many opportunities to use the mom, it could have been your example, it could have been my example, whatever. The girl, I understood what the little girl was sort of representing, the last time that Ella was probably free and open was when she was a little girl. Like, yeah, I see what I can speak art house, Damon. Like, that's what they're up to, right? The last time Ella was that and had that creativity is when she was young. That's most of us, by the way. Most of us were creatively free when we were little. And so her little creative self popped back up into her life and was like, hey, I got ideas. And they turn it into this like combative thing because she's got her adult insecurities. It's actually kind of sophisticated, like what they're trying to do, even though it's kind of like bashing you over the head. It's still there. I'm like, I get what you're up to. I was just way more interested in the mom story, and that sort of fizzled, you know? So we got this descent into madness, but the girl didn't like keep me on the hook. The little girl back and forth didn't keep me on the hook, you know, but I liked the idea of this Ashman. You know, the Ashman, of course, is coming to life in real life and like trying to get her and all that stuff. Kind of interesting stuff. I liked all that. It was just the little girl metaphor to me wasn't the strongest piece of the movie, and the movie sort of hinges on it, truth be told. So that's why the movie's good, not great to me, because I'm like, I would have been more into the mom stuff.
Now, I know on the other side, before we get to categories, the other side that a lot of people I've seen talk about this is how visually stunning the movie is when you inject all the stop motion animation, where some of the story gets told through the eyes of these little stop motion characters of the girl running through the woods and the Ashman, which is the bad guy, the boogeyman, so to speak, the man no one wants to see. And I get that. I understand that. And people are like, wow, that is just original and different, and it's not reality, it's stop motion. You kind of, intertwine the two, and I get that. I do understand the appeal of that to some folks. But this kind of goes back to my other thing where I feel like I'm not being invited to the party. Well, I do enjoy visually stunning movies. I saw Dune Part 2, which is a visually stunning movie to me. It is just and it's a totally different kind of filmmaking, what you're doing with that versus what you're doing here. But that movie is just like my jaw's on the floor for like 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes of watching what Denis Villeneuve did with that movie. I can appreciate a visually stunning movie. I can. And I appreciate the originality of what Robert Morgan did here. That I appreciate. I get that. That's cool. That's like the first time you saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit and they injected animated characters into real world. Even as a million times. Even as a kid, I was like, holy crap, this is really cool. What a weird, cool idea. That was a stunning achievement in filmmaking when Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, right? We all kind of agreed.
Loved it.
Now, I love that movie. I adore that movie. This one, again, I see what they're going for, and I get it. And for the people who saw it and said, that is one of the most stunning, beautiful parts about this movie, was injecting all the stop motion and kind of intertwining it with the story of what's going on with Ella and her mother and the little girl and everything. I am giving you your flowers and saying I appreciate that you get it, that you appreciate that you love it. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
I see what they're going for, and I can appreciate that some folks love the art of that. But it just didn't, to me, it always, you know this about me, Patrick, it always comes down to story for me. And the story just didn't hook me. And like the whole, like, if you do this, I'll give you part 2 of the story. What happens on night 3? I just, by the time Ella was full on into just absolutely gone batty, and she's like, what happens on night 3? I didn't care. I was like, I hope that Ashman breaks in and kills you at this point, because I'm done. Like, I'm out. I've checked out of this story at this point. And so I appreciate it. And to the people who enjoy that visually stunning part of this movie, I get it. I'm conceding to you why you probably like it. For me personally, didn't do it for me.
So, I can relate to that, Damon, because I like, everybody loves like goofy humor and shit and like, silly self-aware stuff. And you know how that goes with me. So I get it. It's just different tastes, just different people. But I think we do converge on one thing. We wanted a better story. I think it is a visually interesting movie. I think that's kind of what kept me on the hook, because the story wasn't. But yeah, it's that stuff's not going to work. That's not going to keep everybody on the hook. That kept me on the hook.
And I appreciate the originality. I'm giving that to it. Like I appreciate the originality because that was the most original part of this movie was the intertwining of reality and the stop motion. It just didn't work for me personally. It didn't really catch me. And again, because I so saw what was coming in the story, it just kind of ruined everything for me. I'm just like, yeah, okay, there's stop motion, great. Like, yeah, okay, this could have been a puppet show for all I care. Like it still didn't do it for me.
Yeah, and there was like little side stuff like the sister stealing her idea. Like that didn't add to the story. It didn't make the story better, you know. Like I understood, I did get why it was there, but it didn't make the story better. Like I just think the mom stuff was better, and I would have liked to have seen more of that.
Yeah, and I think they tried to inject more of the story with the boyfriend and the boyfriend's sister, and it just never. Like that's the big finale is that she kills her boyfriend, she kills her sister, kills the boyfriend's sister, and that's like the big grand finale. She just full on loses it and kills everyone around her. But again, those characters didn't really connect with me. Like they're just like they were barely there. And the boyfriend is like every time he talks, she's like not paying attention. And in her head, we hear these muffled sounds. Like she keeps like she's ignoring what's being said around her, and we only hear like every third word, or like when they finally pick up and he's like Ella, 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 and you finally hear her. Like you can't develop a character if we don't even know what they're saying. Like you can't. Why do I care about her boyfriend if the entire movie is a close up on Ella and I can hear a muffled sound in the background and then 2 seconds of her boyfriend? I don't know him. I don't care about him. Much less do I care about his sister.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there was a stronger story with the sister than there ever even was with the brother, and she's the C story. She's not even the B story. So you know what I mean? Like that, the impact of their deaths falls a little flat because, like you're saying, if she doesn't notice him, why should I? And then 2, okay, yeah, she hates the sister, and we understand why she would kill the sister, but the death in the end doesn't feel like it was like fully fleshed out. It was kind of weird. Again, I think the mom stuff was right there. It was there for the taking, and they didn't use it. So whatever, that's fine.
If she would have complained to her mom and said her boyfriend's name, what was his name? Tony. What was
Tony? Was it Tony? No, it was Tom. I said Tony in the intro.
Tom's sister wants me to go to work for this advertising company, and she won't even let she stole my idea. And the mother was just like, well, you got to do something about that. Like you can't let her steal your ideas. And then she goes out and kills the sister. I'm like, oh, here's the manipulation from the mother. I know that's much more classic horror story of like.
Totally, yeah, it is.
But that's what I'm saying. At least then I understand. Like, then you see it, like, why it's happening. Because, again, by the time she killed them, I'm like, why do I care that she killed them? Like, they didn't really mean anything to the story, and we didn't really even get to know them.
Yeah, no, it is the flaw of the movie, in my opinion.
All right. Enough of me complaining. Let's get to categories. We're going to kick things off as we do each and every week here on the show with best performance. And let's just be completely honest about this, Patrick. This is a movie built around Aisling Franciosi and her performance as Ella. I'd love to sit here and say, oh, Tony was great, or Tom, whatever the fuck his name was. I'd love to say he was great, and I'll give listen, like I hated the character, but like that's what they were going for. Was the little girl played by Caitlin Springall. Like she was good. She was good as an actor. She also did a film not that long ago, George Clooney. Like she's a talented actor. Yeah. They made her be like the kind of annoying child, and so she achieved what she was going for. So I want to give her flowers. But let's be honest, Patrick, this is a movie built for and built around Aisling Franciosi.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, of course, my best performance as well. When you've got to play, I'm trying to think of a more gentle word than crazy. When you're descending into madness, I think you gotta dig in. You gotta find your way, and not all the way. They all don't look the same. And I think Aisling's style was different. It was a weird, like subdued, kind of confused, like she was doing kind of like something a little bit different. I hadn't seen it. Like I'm comparing it to like Smile or Saint Maud, because those are two other movies about women having this like descent into madness. They all play differently. It didn't feel like she was pulling from something that I'd seen in the past. So I give her props for that.
Yeah, her performance was good. She played, the way I would describe it is she played somebody sleep deprived slipping into madness, because she was. By the end of the movie, you realize she hasn't slept. Like, they actually mentioned this at one point where her boyfriend's like, "You didn't sleep at all last night, did you?" And you could just tell, like, that's just adding to her lunacy. But her performance is great. Again, I clearly didn't care for the movie. The plot didn't get me. A lot of things didn't get me, but I can still appreciate a good performance. And her performance was stellar. She did a great job, and this was a performance piece built around her. And again, that may be part of the flaw of this movie, because again, we talked about, like, we didn't give enough of the mother. We wanted more of the mother. We didn't clearly care about Tony or Tom or whatever his name was. And
we can't even get his name right. That's how little we care about him.
So, like, it's almost like this was 95% Ella, and she stole the show. Would the movie have been better, though, if we would have gotten a little bit more of Tom, we got a little bit more of the sister, got more of the mom? Maybe. Could have still been a performance piece, but for what it is, I can appreciate the performance, and Aisling Franciosi did a great job.
Definitely.
Let's move on to our next category, and that is our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP Award. This, of course, is the award named after the great legendary horror actor Ken Foray in the movie From Beyond, when he needs to save the day, but he only has on a thong bikini, but he still grabs a butcher knife, jumps down a set of stairs, and attacks an alien force. That's why we named this the Ken Foray Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP Award. So, Patrick, for Stop Motion, who gets your Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP?
By the way, we're recording this on Ken Foray's birthday, so happy birthday, Ken Foray. I'm sure he's a big fan of the show. My MVP goes to the sound designer, Damon. This movie, you talked a little bit about it. When the boyfriend's talking, he's sort of a blur and muffled and in the background. That's one aspect of it. I think the sound design of this movie does help create the sense of losing your mind, of starting to hallucinate, of starting to feel weird, like sounds like change levels and things feel blurry, like sounds feel blurry and all this. It's a great design. It's also and one of the interviewers said it perfectly. It's a very squelchy movie. There's a lot of like wet sound in the stop motion animation stuff. It's made of this waxy material, and then the meat, and then there are just times when the world starts to kind of fade into the background and into her audio background, and like you hear certain sounds that are a bit unnerving, Damon. So I think the sound designer was the hardest working person on the entire shoot.
Yeah, it's a lot of ASMR in this movie, where you get a lot of like the audio sensory kind of thing going on in this movie. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of that, and I can appreciate that as well. So I'm going to give my MVP award. I know this is a cop-out answer. When you don't particularly love a movie, you have to find something to like about it. And I know I've done this before in a way on some of the, we haven't been doing the MVP award for a long time, but since we introduced this category, I know I picked similar on another movie. I can't remember which one it was, but I picked similar, and I know I'm doing it again. But I do mean this. I mean this genuinely when I say this. The performance was good. Again, none of the performances of the movie are bad, by the way, just to be clear about that. Like, I think all the performances are actually good. It's a well-acted movie. It's not a badly directed movie. Robert Morgan did a good job of directing the movie. It just, again, comes down to story for me, and the story just did not work. But my MVP award goes to two people, and that is IFC and Shudder. Because for as much as I may not like this movie, there are certainly a lot of people on TikTok right now who believe this is going to be one of the best movies of 2024. This is going to be kind of like Men in a way, where it's very divisive, because I guarantee you, as you said, I feel a little left out right now because I've seen everybody else loving this and I didn't. But you're right. There's going to be a crowd of people who don't like this. There's a couple of filmmakers who we know, if we put this out there, guaranteed they're probably going to message, you know who I'm talking about. They're going to be like, yes. What is this art house shit?
Mm-hmm.
But here's where I appreciate this, and this is why I give my MVP award to IFC and Shudder, and also, I guess, the British Film Institute, because they gave him £905,000, which is basically $1 million, to make this movie, is that without that interest, without that dedication of studios, the British Film Institute, Shudder, whatever, to actually allow Robert Morgan to make his vision come to life, we don't get these kind of movies. It didn't work for me, but it seemed to work for a lot of people. And there's a world where if it was only Sony and Warner Brothers and Universal and Paramount, that they would be like, this doesn't make money. This isn't gonna win us awards. So why the fuck would I pay you to make this movie? As much as I didn't particularly enjoy stop motion, we don't get to I'll go back to Saint Maud. Saint Maud's a film that I didn't love. It was okay. I didn't hate it. It was good enough. I enjoyed parts of it. But I immediately said during that podcast, go back and listen to it, I said, Rose Glass is a filmmaker that I'm infinitely interested in now. I'm curious to see what she does next. Her next film that comes out soon, Love Lies Bleeding with Kristen Stewart, I am so intensely excited for that movie. It's like one of my most anticipated films of 2024. Not horror, more of a thriller, revenge thriller, whatever you want to call it. But I am so into that movie. I cannot wait. If I could buy tickets today, I would. That's how excited I am. You may not get Love Lies Bleeding written and bought up by A24, produced by A24, coming out in theaters, getting all the flowers. It was like a darling at Sundance. You don't get that if she doesn't make Saint Maud, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why I give flowers to IFC, Shudder, the British Film Institute for funding this, because I may not have liked this movie. Didn't work for me. But guess what? I do see there is talent in Robert Morgan. And maybe Robert Morgan's next film for A24 or another indie studio will be something that I'll absolutely love. And so that's why I appreciate that there's still people out there funding these movies that are weird, quirky, certainly not mainstream. They are not mainstream assholes like me and Kramer. But I don't want everything to be Marvel. I don't want everything to be DC. I don't want everything to be big blockbuster movies. I need these art house movies because you don't get talk to me. You don't get a lot of things. So even though it didn't work for me, I appreciate that there's still people who see the genius in these kind of things and say, let's take a shot.
We need it, Damon. Probably now more than ever, because studios used to take this chance. The big studios, I'm talking Warner Brothers and all the big names, used to take their chance, and they'd make mid-budget or small-budget movies, and they'd put them out in quieter parts of the calendar year, and they didn't have to make $150 million in one weekend to be considered a success. That's the new world. And if that's the only world, that's not sustainable. It just won't be. It won't be sustainable if we do that. We need studios like IFC, like Shudder to go, we see something interesting here. We want to back you for a little bit of money and get your movie out there and get people to go see it. It's important. It's important for the survival of cinema, like in all its respects. I don't give a shit if you go to the theaters or not. I love the theater. I'll go until they close the last one or till I die, one of the two. This is how you keep it going. This is how you keep this art form that we love going. Support the shit. Go see it, or get a trial to Shudder and watch it, or whatever. Or if you get a subscription to Shudder and watch it, support stuff. And then, if you don't like it, email us about it and tell us why. We want to hear it. I want to hear, by the way, speaking of emails, since we got an email from Eric this week, if you've gotten this deep into the episode, if you want us to review Love Lies Bleeding, put it in an email for me, okay? And if I get more than 2 emails that we should do Love Lies Bleeding, we're doing Love Lies Bleeding, Damon. That's all I need. I just need 3 people to email, because that means, whatever, 40,000, 50,000 people that listen. That's a great percentage of people to go, yeah, we want to hear you do Love Lies Bleeding. If they want to hear it, we do it. But we got to support the indie stuff. We got to support the small stuff. It's super, super important.
Yeah, and listen, is it great when a movie like Barbie is critically acclaimed, gets nominated for everything, and it makes $1 billion? Yeah, that's awesome. You know what I mean? But that's rare.
That's good too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's rare when that happens. When Black Panther came out a few years ago, hugely popular, made $1 billion, got nominated for an Oscar, all this guy. That's great. You know what I mean? But that's not the norm. So we need, Sony and Warner Brothers and all these other studios, they're not going to invest in stop motion. So we need IFC, Shudder, and people like us to at least go watch. Listen, I spent my money on it. I'm not, I'm not asking for a refund. You know what I mean? I'm glad they made this movie. Did I enjoy it? Did it work for me? No, but as I said, I'm glad they did it. I hope Robert Morgan gets another chance, and maybe his next film will be something that I'll absolutely adore, because Rose Glass didn't make my favorite film with Saint Maud, but boy, I am way excited about Love Lies Bleeding. I cannot wait to go see that movie.
I have a tangible example. I didn't like Scare Me. Not because I thought it was a bad movie. I don't like that kind of humor. I don't like the super self-aware humor. But I said at that podcast, I said, whatever Josh Rubin does next, who is the director of Scare Me, I can't wait to see it. Because I can recognize talent when I see it. And then he came out with Werewolves Within. It's one of my favorite werewolf movies I've ever seen. Easily top 3. I love that movie. It's a great movie. So that's why like that, you know, and Scare Me was a small budget movie. And then we got a bigger budget movie in Werewolves Within. And now he's got another movie coming out with Jasmine Savoy Brown that I can't wait to see. Josh Rubin's a great creator, but it takes the small stuff to get to the better and more budgeted stuff so that we keep getting more cool shit. I just want more cool shit.
Yeah, so that's what I said. That's my MVP. People like IFC and Shudder who will give Robert Morgan the distribution or what, British Film Institute, everyone who's going to see this, say, I see the talent here. Let's try it. Didn't work for me. It's going to work. It did work for a lot of people. Clearly it did work for people, not me. But the fact that we need these movies, we need more of these movies. Like I said, my favorite horror film was it last year, 2 years ago, was Fresh. Now that was on Hulu, and it definitely had a bigger cast. It had, obviously had Sebastian Stan had a named cast, but it was ultimately a Hulu release. But I loved the filmmaker. I loved the creativity. That was the first time filmmaker making that movie. Talk about what's it? The trilogy I'm thinking of, the Fear Street trilogy. Yes,
Fear
it was
Street,
Netflix. Yes, it was Netflix. It was a much bigger production, but that was also still a fairly new filmmaker who got a chance to make those movies. So, again, I want to see new people take a chance at something and do something different. And so, again, didn't work for me, but I want to see what Robert Morgan does next.
Let's do it.
Let's move on to best scare. Patrick, what was your best scare in the stop motion?
During the little acid trip that they have going, the little acid trip sequence, she walks into this one room and everybody's watching a projection of what I call the Tom Hanks puppet. There's just this puppet being projected against the wall that looks like, to me, it looks like Tom Hanks. And it was super creepy. Like, puppets are kind of creepy. And so I picked that as my best scare because it was very unsettling.
Yeah, the puppet on the screen, that was during the whole acid trip thing. And so, yeah, that was I read your notes before I saw the movie because I clicked on the email and I saw Tom Hanks puppet and I was like, what the hell is that? And I saw the movie and I was like, oh, okay, now I can kind of see what you're talking about there. For me, I'm not trying to ruin our final category. This to me didn't really scare me at any point.
Yeah, it's not a scary movie to me.
But there was one good, like the probably the best like jump scare in the movie is when Ella believes she's being stalked by the Ashman in real life, like not in her creation, and she runs into her door, locks the door, and looks out the peephole, and the Ashman's eye pops on the other side of the peephole. Very classic jump scare. That was probably the only one. Like, it didn't get me. I saw it coming, but I was like, okay, that was where you're trying to go for a more traditional jump scare. Now, there are some very gory scenes, which that could be scary to people, which we'll move on to our next category, which is best gore. Towards the end, the last like half hour of this movie turns very, very, very bloody. And if that is what gets you and that makes you squeamish, then that part will probably scare you because it does get pretty graphic towards the end. What was your best gore in stop motion?
The funny thing is my best gore wasn't really gory at all. It was, and there is a bunch of great gore in this movie, but there was just this one point where it's really getting into the spiral of madness. And I think now that the Ashman has actually physically manifested and he grabs her, or he goes for her, and as she tries to run, her legs kind of like fold and turn to rubber. It was just such a fucking cool effect. I was like, I don't know how they did that, but I loved how it looked. Like I just reveled in it. And I mean, any leg breaks that you see, like I know they're all over like Instagram and stuff when people are like doing stupid shit and they fall and break their leg. Leg breaks are like hard to look at. And for me, they're really hard to look at. This wasn't like a leg break. It was like a leg folding over. It was like super, super weird and surreal. And I just liked it.
Yeah, her legs turned into puppet legs. They just like collapsed underneath her and turned to rubber, which was interesting. It was an interesting choice there. I agree. And it's interesting that's your pick because there was a lot of blood. So my pick I thought for sure you were going to go for the scene where she literally cuts open her own leg and she's just like trying to dig into her stitched up leg. She cuts her leg and then she literally rips out the stitches and starts digging into her own bloody leg like a scene out of Saw trying to look for a key or something. I thought that for sure was going to be your pick. So I went in another direction because I thought that was going to be yours. My pick, and I'm saying this as a guy who has been a cameraman at times over the years, not to your extent, by the way. Patrick is a fantastic filmmaker with actual camera equipment, not me with my fucking camcorder, but or my iPhone. But if you've ever carried a monopod or like a regular tripod, a lot of tripod now, bigger tripods have like rubber legs to like give you like grip on a floor. But if you get like a cheap like Target monopod or a tripod or like Best Buy tripod, the end of the tripod is like a little stabby. It's like a little spike.
It's a spike, yeah.
Yeah. And so I had, when I first got tripods, when I started shooting stuff, when I would go to events that I would cover, I just got a cheap tripod. I didn't know like you had to spend like hundreds of dollars to get like a real good tripod. I eventually upgraded and got like a real tripod monopod. But when I first started, I had the cheap ones. They had this like spike on the end. And there's a moment where she kills the sister, Ella kills the sister by taking the tripod leg with the stabby part on the end and jams it down into her neck. And that's how she dies. And I was just like, as a person who has accidentally stabbed himself with a monopod or a tripod a couple of times over the years, like stabbed my leg and I'm like cursing the thing, I was like, you know what? That felt real to me because you could stab someone through the throat with a stabby end of a tripod.
Oh yeah, no, and some of the bigger tripods have them too, and they're kind of like hidden by the rubber legs and stuff. You can like remove the rubber legs and like so you can like stab it into like dirt and stuff like that. So that was a good one because it's not like she's like, you know, like stabbing at her. She's kind of like grinding it into her neck and like just puncturing her skin. It's very graphic actually. Like even when you're not seeing it, you're kind of hearing it. Again, sound design. You're hearing like how it's putting pressure on her neck and she's kind of gargling and trying to keep her windpipe from collapsing, but it eventually gets right through.
Yeah, the sister's doing the classic Sidney Prescott to Stu thing and Scream where she sticks the finger in the leg wound and she's like trying to get her off with that. And so she just takes the tripod, but she doesn't like slam it down and stab her. She like takes it over top of her and just like slowly pushes it down into her throat. And you just see the blood kind of gurgle out of her throat. And so I was like, damn, that's pretty graphic. And again, as somebody who stabbed himself accidentally with a tripod, that's real, people. You can absolutely stab yourself with a tripod. I promise you can. I have wounds to show for it.
Take Damon's word.
Yeah. Let's move on. I love this category. This is my favorite category, and probably because, again, you can clearly tell I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. Next category is the scariest puppet in a film. This was a creation of the genius that is Patrick Guerra. So, Patrick, the scariest puppet in a film. Boy, did I do some research on this one today, by the way. I spent like an hour making sure I had my favorite puppet picked out.
Damon, my scariest puppet ever is, Damon, as far as I can tell, my first proper horror scare ever in my entire life. Fats, the puppet from the movie Magic starring Anthony Hopkins. I remember I was a child, and when I say a child, I'm talking like 5 or 6. And Magic came out in like the 70s before I was born. But Magic was on TV, and Fats was on TV, and his eyes turned and looked at me. And just my little child self was like, that's not supposed to happen. And I freaked the fuck out. And I was very little. I remember it. I think it's genuinely the first horror scare I've ever had in my life. And it has stuck with me ever since. I'm not like deathly afraid of puppets or anything like that. I just remember that as being the original scare that ever scared little Patrick when he was just a little boy. And it was indeed from Fats from Magic.
That's a good movie, too. Magic's a good movie. I like that movie a lot. Anthony Hopkins, very young in his career. That's a good movie. So I had to do some digging because I want to mention some of the ones that people are going to be sitting here saying, how did you not say this one? Of course, Billy the Puppet from Saw. That's a classic.
Hey, Billy.
Annabelle from the Conjuring movies. That's an easy one, and that is a creepy doll.
Good design.
Good design on that one. Also, another Billy the Puppet from Dead Silence, the second James Wan film after Saw, excuse me. Dead Silence was the movie Dead Silence he did after Saw, and that is Billy the Puppet, which is a creepy puppet. I like that movie a lot. Puppet Master, of course, there's a whole series of those.
Yep.
And of course, Chucky. How could you forget Chucky? Because technically he is a puppet. But the one I went with, and I swear to God, we did not plan this. I did not orchestrate this to have the same answer as you in terms of like, I didn't pick Magic, but I picked the one that scared me as a kid. And the one that scared the absolute piss out of me as a child was the clown puppet in Poltergeist. That clown puppet freaked me the fuck out. I'm not scared of clowns. To this day, I'm not scared of clowns, and I'm not scared of puppets. But that clown was a freaky little fucker in that movie. And Poltergeist, that movie traumatized me so much as a child because I know I've told this story on the show before. We never reviewed that movie on the podcast. We're going to have to do it at some point. But there's a classic scene where the little boy in the house gets attacked by the tree outside his window. It comes and basically eats him. And I know I've told this story before, but there was a tree outside my window when I was a kid, and we lived right next to a major road, so there were always cars going by, so I always saw the flash of the shadow of this tree in my bedroom when I was sleeping at night. Without fail, I would see it. Like, if I woke up for 2 seconds, inevitably a car would go by, and I would see the flash of the shadow of this tree outside my window. And after I saw Poltergeist, it freaked me out so bad I could not sleep for nights. But that clown puppet in Poltergeist was scary as hell to me. So that's my pick.
What is it with kids and puppets? What is that shit?
Because puppets are supposed to be for kids. Like, they're supposed to be kid friendly, not scare the piss out of you. But yeah, like, that's like clowns. Like, clowns are supposed to be like fun. And then coulrophobia is a real thing where people are absolutely terrified of clowns. Let's move on to our next category, Patrick, and talk about remake, sequel, or leave it alone. I think you know my answer to this one, Patrick, so I'll go ahead and go first based upon my answer so far. And listen, the idea of stop motion wasn't bad. The creativity and originality of the artistry, meaning the visuals, was different, and I appreciate that. My biggest problem, not to bang on a dead horse here, is the story. So remake is my answer. And we've already talked about it. Focus on the relationship with the mom more. Or if you're not going to focus on the relationship with the mom, give me a reason to care about other characters in this film so when they die, it matters. Because Ella is 100% the focus. And the only other focus we get in this entire movie are the mom who disappears 15 minutes in and the little girl who is not actually there. Nobody else matters. So remake it and give me a better story. That would be my suggestion. Patrick, what about you?
I probably would also say remake and just do the mom thing, or basically just go watch Hereditary, because I think that's the better version of this movie. Like, yeah, I wanted the mom more. I thought that was the stronger story. We didn't get it. This movie just needs a stronger story. So that remake is my choice.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I think that, like, not to go too far off tangent here, Patrick, but like, I think that's part of what, anytime there's a movie like this that like kind of makes me angry in a way, it's because I see where they could have gone, in my opinion, could have made a better movie. You know what I mean? And so that bugs me because I'm like, you were close, you were not far off for making a better movie. And again, like I said, this is my opinion. There's going to be a lot of people out there be like, you're dead wrong. This was a brilliant film, and it's going to be one of the best horror films of all time, or horror films of 2024. And you know what? You're totally entitled to that opinion, just not for me. Patrick, this is an interesting one for this particular movie, which is, can we survive this horror film? So, Patrick, let's put ourselves in the friend group, because even though they clearly don't matter, I guess we're living in Ella's orbit?
Well, yeah, she went out to drink with a bunch of animators. Like, clearly they all hang out together. I guess Tom's the only one that's not an animator, but all the rest of them seem to be.
Yeah, so are we surviving this horror film?
You know what? I'm going to put myself in the shoes of Ella. And I'm going to say that I can survive this horror film, Damon, because guess what? I know what sleep deprivation's all about. I got 2 small kids. Like, I know what it's like to not sleep for days on end. I'm barely sleeping right now because it's been the most insane fucking month. Like the whole month of February was insanity. And I seem to manage to do 2 jobs at once, record a couple of podcasts, and be a father, I think. I'm not quite sure, but I somehow made it out on top. So I'm going to say, yes, I can survive this horror movie.
I'm going to agree and say I will survive this horror film based upon being in the friend group, because not to say I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I did take several quarters of psychology in college, and I would recognize pretty quickly that this woman is going off her rocker. Now, the only way I would die is because I'd be the one calling the doctors, being like, you might want to go check on Ella because she's off her shit right now. And so I would survive based upon that, because I would recognize, like, nobody recognized the trigger signs that she's completely losing her mind. Which is also another part of the movie that's a little weird. Like, nobody notices that she's just like completely like unhinged, whatever. But yeah, I would recognize those things, and one of 2 things would happen. Either if I cared enough, I would call for help, or I would just change my number and Ella wouldn't see me anymore. I'd be like, well, Ella, it's been good knowing you. Peace out.
Yeah. This one doesn't feel hard to survive.
Yeah, it's not really that, unless you're Tony or Tom, or what is his name?
Tom Tony is his name. And by the way, in the final sequence where he gets killed, I was like, how are you losing to her in a fight? It didn't make any sense. He's way bigger than her. She's a small, slight woman. And I was like, she's sleep deprived and she's deranged, and she didn't catch him by like surprise. Like, they have a wrestling match and he loses. And I was like,
also,
that's on you, Tony.
And also, just a small gripe about like the staging of it all. He ultimately basically almost dies because she pushes him down a flight of stairs.
Yeah.
There's like 6 stairs. Like, I'm not saying that you can't get physically.
I've fallen down 6 flights of stairs.
I'm not saying. Listen, I'm not saying it's not possible to fall down 6 stairs and get dramatically injured.
Of course,
I want to belittle that from happening. But if you're gonna do it and give me that, like, give me a little bit more. Like, give me like a full like flight of stairs. Like, this is like literally, it was like 6 stairs. I'm like, and the guy's like 6 foot tall. Like, he would have just fallen on his back and slid to the bottom. Like, they make it seem like he had this dramatic tumble and fall, and it's like 6 stairs. Like, I've fallen 6 stairs before. It sucks. It hurts. I maybe hurt or banged my arm or something, but I didn't certainly get crippled at the bottom of the set of stairs like he did.
Yeah, and like she like jumps on top of him and is able to like overpower him, and I'm like, is he even phased? Like he just hit his funny bone. Why is she being able to like destroy him in this part? Didn't make sense.
Well, they made him tumble like really dramatically down the stairs. Like, she pushed him backwards. I'm like, it's 6 stairs. Like, you're not going that far down. Like, come on now. Like, at least give me like the Wolf of Wall Street where he's high on Quaaludes and he sees like this giant staircase when it's actually 6 stairs. Like, this one was actually 6 stairs.
See, it gave you a laugh, Damon. Give it that.
It did. All right, last category, Patrick. Is it scary? At the end of the day, Patrick, when we watch stop motion, is this movie scary?
I think it's actually pretty unsettling. Like, I think the stop motion stuff is pretty interesting visually, and if you don't know what's coming in, if you haven't listened to our spoilers or anything, and you go in, it's like you're kind of in the unknown. And so there is this element of being very unsettled. If you don't like seeing dead animals or like meat, that can unsettle you. If you don't like puppets, that's going to unsettle you. I can't, even though it didn't scare me in the slightest, I can't with good conscience go, no, it's not scary, because some people, without ever giving a shit about what the story is, Damon, are going to be freaked out by this movie. That's just what's going to happen. I mean, that leg scene is intense when she's ripping her stitches out and digging into her thigh. Looks very realistic, looks very intense. And so I'm like, yeah, some people are going to find this movie scary.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm going to give 2 answers. My answer is no, it didn't scare me at all. Like, I was like, when I walked out, I was like, was this kind of not a horror movie? Like, it kind of didn't really feel like that to me. But on the flip side, I agree with you. There's some disturbing imagery. The mental breakdown in the film can be a little scary, a little disturbing. I would say it's more disturbing than scary, which I know disturbing could be a version of scary, but I would say this film is more disturbing than scary. It certainly didn't scare me. Really didn't even disturb me, to be honest with you. But again, that's me as a guy who didn't really like the movie.
That's what I'm saying.
But for the average moviegoer or for people who might like this movie, I would say that's probably going to be the appeal, as it is disturbing. It is kind of disturbing to watch her descend into madness and the things that she can becomes completely unhinged and manic about, digging into her own wound in her leg and killing her boyfriend and killing her sister or killing his sister and all those kind of things. So if that's the appeal, then yeah, it's disturbing. Not scary, disturbing, I think would be the word I'd use.
Yeah, totally. So it's going to scare some people. It's not going to scare us. Yeah.
But again, I was great on that scale. So, like I said, I know we're fucking weirdos. And so, we're not going to be on that heartbeat meter where they're like measure someone's heart rate when they watch a horror movie. They're like, are you guys alive over there? Like, what's going on?
How come Host didn't make your heart rate jump? In fact, it went down. I was like, well, I find it relaxing.
Yeah, this is like my favorite night of the, like, this is what I fall asleep to at night. What are you talking about?
This isn't my guided meditation. I don't understand.
This is my comfort movie. This is your comfort movie? Yeah, it's my comfort
Texas
movie.
Chainsaw Massacre is your comfort movie?
Yeah, like that buzzing at the saw puts me right to sleep. I go right.
I love that, dude.
That is our show for this week, folks. Go watch Stop Motion. It is in theaters right now. If you miss it in theaters, it drops on Shudder in May, so you can see it over there streaming as well. As I always say, whether I like a movie, Patrick likes a movie, whether we love a movie, go see it in theaters, support cinema, and that's what you can do right now with Stop Motion. If you have questions, comments, like our guy sending us an email this week, Eric, who sent us an email, send us messages on email. You can send them to rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Also, to Patrick's point, if you want us to review Love Lies Bleeding, which definitely teeters the line more to thriller than horror, but if you want us to review it, and we get at least 3 emails for people saying, I want to hear you guys review Love Lies Bleeding, we will take a stab, because I tell you what, it's not going to take a lot to push us over the edge, because we both really want to see that movie. So if you want to hear us review it, it's not quite horror, but if there's at least 3 people out there who are like passionate enough to want to hear us review Love Lies Bleeding, send us an email. We'll probably get no emails, and they'll be like, yeah, stick to the horror, you fuckers. But if you want to, send us an email. You can also send us messages on social media. Find us Rewind of the Living Dead on Instagram, on Twitter /X, and over on Facebook. And obviously you can find us on podcasts everywhere you find your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course over on our YouTube channel. We just passed, I think, 200 subscribers on our YouTube.
Hey.
Which is it doesn't sound like a big number, but we were so late to the game starting our YouTube, which was a huge mistake on our part, but that's too late to do anything about it now. Please subscribe to our YouTube. You can listen, or if you want to see us and watch us lose our minds talking.
You want to see 2 decrepit puppets talk about horror movies? You can do that on YouTube, folks.
Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You can always find us on our own personal social media channels as well. Feel free to send us messages over there. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in each and every week to the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.